Without a doubt, the most famous and legendary steam locomotive ever made by Lionel was the 1937 700 EW scale Hudson. It was the first mass-produced model to use new die-casting, metal-forming methods to accurately reproduce an O-scale steam engine and tender in exquisite rivet-by-rivet detail. The $75 price of the scale Hudson put it beyond the reach of most Lionel customers in the Depression era of 1937, but this new manufacturing method enabled the company to begin producing a whole range of more affordable non-scale toy steamers that were more detailed and realistic than their earlier tinplate counterparts. This handsome 226E from 1940 is a good example. By the end of the 1980s, Lionel LTI had the experience, technology, and confidence to contemplate doing a modern version of the 1937 700E scale Hudson. The decision to build the 1-700E was the culmination of a gradual process that saw Lionel MPC and the Richard Kuhn-owned Lionel LTI relearn how to make the best pieces produced by the original Lionel Corporation in O-gauge. The 1990 5340 was a 1/48th scale model of the J1E Hudson and a true reissue of the 5344 of 1937, not just an upgrade of the post-war 773 or the Lionel MPC 783 Hudson with their less-than-scale 2426W tenders. Production models of the 1-700E carried the 5340 number, which was worn by a real J1E Hudson. Lionel 5340s came in two versions. The 6-18005 had a very nice display case, and the 6-18012 was the product number for the locomotive by itself. A large number of 5340s were made, perhaps as many as 10,000, and that affects their value as collectibles. The tooling for the locomotive boiler and other engine pieces was mostly new because the original tooling was showing a great deal of wear from having been used for all the pre-war, post-war, and modern-era Hudsons. As you can see from this image, the boiler and steam chest have a high level of detail, including boiler piping and intricate valve gear. The scale proportion 700W tender basically used the original tooling, except for the coal pile, which was reshaped for the 5340 with more detail. Both the locomotive and tender were fitted with NMRA standard O-scale couplers. Lionel couplers were also supplied, but they had to be installed by the dealer or the purchaser. The 1-700E was the best scale Hudson Lionel LTI could build here in the USA in 1990, with every high-end feature the company was capable of installing then. In terms of the open-frame motor and the running gear, it was thoroughly conventional, but the electronic sound system was revolutionary. Rail Sounds used a computer microchip to digitally reproduce the sounds of the whistle, bell, and running gear. This was the second year that Lionel had offered Rail Sounds, and it was the first step which in later years became a complete digital sound and control system for three-rail trains. In addition to Rail Sounds, the 1-700E was equipped with smoke that exhausted from the stack and the steam chest. The smoke coming from the steam chest was a less-than-popular feature with some hobbyists because it looked to them like the smoke was just leaking out of a faulty smokestack, rather than being seen as a new positive feature that had been added to the 5340. 20 years later, it was time for Lionel LLC to build another 5344 scale J1E Hudson. The idea behind the Vision Line series was to advance the technology, detailed appearance, and the fun quotient of realistic operation for three-rail trains well beyond the current state of the art. In the minds of devoted Lionelistas, the Hudson was the perfect candidate for this treatment. The 464 New York Central Hudson was a handsome, mainstream-looking steamer that was much beloved and desired by three-rail collectors and operators alike. almost 8 decades after the first scale 5344 was offered for sale, the mystique was still strong, and a Vision Line Hudson was a product Lionel could profitably exploit for the benefit of the company and eager customers as well. Could the much-anticipated Vision Line 700E number 5344 Black Hudson meet the expectations of the high-end Lionel customer base? At a suggested retail price of $15.99 for a non-articulated steamer, failure to satisfy a very picky clientele was really not an option as far as Lionel LLC was concerned. George Brown, our technical and new products editor, answered the question with a solid yes in his informative product review of the Vision Line 700E Hudson in run number 252, the October-November 2011 issue of O-Gauge Railroading magazine. Starting with a head-on view, the Vision Line Hudson makes a memorable first impression. With its illuminated classification lights, prominent 5344 number plate, and scale drop-style coupler that can be replaced with a Lionel-size coupler. From the front to the back of the locomotive and on to the details of the tender, the 21st century version of the 5344 is a worthy successor to its fabled predecessors. Close-ups show the steam chest and the subdued finish of the valve gear to good advantage. Comparing cab views of the Vision Line Hudson to the 1990 model emphasizes the increased wealth of detail in the new model. Where the cab of the 1-700E was the location for lots of colored wire and the back of the open-frame motor, the cab of the 5344 is fully detailed, including red valves, backlit gauges, and engineer and fireman figures, plus a flickering firebox glow that gets brighter with increases in speed. Although the tender of the Vision Line Hudson does not sport a scale coupler like the 1990 tender, it has a working electrocoupler and more detail, including a backup light on the rear and a real coal pile on the tender. Underneath, the two locomotives and tenders are significantly different. The 1990 1-700E gets by with 2 rollers for current pickup, while the Vision Line 700E uses 4 rollers. Also of note is the brass plaque under the rear truck of the 1-700E that proudly proclaims the engine was made in the USA. The 1990 700W tender has a speaker enclosure, but the 2011 tender needs 2 openings for its dual Fat Boy speakers. The painting and lettering on our 700E samples appeared to be flawless, and the silver-gray coloring of the letters and numbers looked more attractive than the flat white markings on the 1-700E. There have been comments that the paint on the Vision Line Hudson is a little too shiny and that it makes the locomotive look too new when compared to the finish on the 1-700E. Our response is that the Vision Line Hudson is supposed to look like it just came out of the shop, and 20 years or so on the shelf or on the layout should mellow the finish to look like the 1-700E of 1990. If that's deemed important, the only thing you need to do is live long enough to note the change. To sum up, if you want a piece of modern Lionel history, the 1-700E is a good choice for a shelf piece. If performance is important to you, as well as historical significance, then the Vision Line 700E is a wonderful choice, even though you will lower its value if you run it. But if you're thinking of buying either of them strictly as an investment, our advice, in a word, is don't.